If God struck down mass punishment upon mankind, it would ride on horseback. Its name was Attila the Hun. Feared across empires and remembered for centuries as the Scourge of God, Attila was no ordinary conqueror. He commanded the Huns with unmatched ferocity, shaking both the Eastern and Western Roman empires to their core. To his enemies, he was destruction incarnate. To his people, he was the warrior king who carved their name into history. But who was this man who terrified the greatest empire on earth? And how did he rise from the endless steppes of Central Asia to become one of the most feared names in all of history? The world before Attila. The Roman Empire in the 5th century was in decline. Corruption ran deep, politics fractured, and the legions were shadows of their former glory. On their borders lurked countless threats: Germanic tribes, Goths, Vandals, and most terrifying of all, the Huns. The Huns were unlike anything the Romans had faced before. Masters of horseback warfare, they lived, fought, and even slept in their saddles. Their arrows could pierce armor, their tactics were lightning fast, and their very appearance scarred faces, wild hair, and strange language struck fear into settled civilizations. When Attila was born around 406 AD, the Huns were already a power to be reckoned with, but under his leadership they would become a storm that shook Europe to its foundations. Rise to power. Attila first rose to prominence alongside his brother Bleda after the death of their uncle Rugila in 434 AD. The two brothers ruled jointly, inheriting a vast domain that stretched across the Hungarian plain into Central Europe. Together, they signed treaties with the Eastern Roman Empire, treaties that demanded gold in exchange for peace. And Rome, too weak to resist, tribute after tribute flowed into Hun hands. But Attila wanted more than wealth. He wanted dominance. Within a decade, his brother Bleda was dead, some say by Attila's own hand, and Attila became the sole ruler of the Huns. Ruthless, cunning, and charismatic, he forged a single-minded war machine, the Scourge of the East. With Bleda gone, Attila turned his attention to the Eastern Roman Empire. He launched devastating campaigns across the Balkans, burning cities, massacring populations, and driving terror into Constantinople itself. In 447 AD, he struck with such force that Emperor Theodosius II had no choice but to pay an enormous ransom. The Romans were forced to hand over 2,100 pounds of gold every year just to keep Attila from destroying them. To the Romans, this was more than humiliation. It was proof that the empire was no longer invincible. And to many Christians, it seemed as if God himself had unleashed Attila to punish them for their sins. Thus the name spread, the Scourge of God. The invasion of Gaul. In 451 AD, Attila invaded Gaul with a massive army. Cities fell in panic, but Roman general Flavius Aetius rallied forces and allied with the Visigoths. The armies met at the Battle of the Catalonian Plains, one of the bloodiest battles of late antiquity. Though Attila was not completely defeated, his advance was checked. The invasion of Italy. In 452 AD, Attila invaded northern Italy, destroying cities like Aquileia. Panic gripped the peninsula, and Rome seemed vulnerable. Then, legend tells us, Pope Leo I met Attila and convinced him to withdraw. Whether it was diplomacy or a divine vision, the eternal city was spared. Death of a conqueror. In 453 AD, Attila celebrated another marriage, one of many. But that very night, he died suddenly. Some sources say he drank too much and bled to death from a nosebleed. Others whisper of assassination. His death shocked the Huns. Without his leadership, their empire crumbled within a few years. Rival tribes rose up, the Huns scattered, and their brief reign of terror faded into legend. Legacy of fear. Even in death, Attila's name endured. To the Romans, he was remembered as a punishment sent by God, a scourge that revealed their empire's fragility. To his people, he was the great king who united the tribes and made the world tremble. More than 1,500 years later, his legend still stands. Attila the Hun remains a symbol of ruthless power, of a man who wielded fear like a weapon and shook civilizations to their core. Empires rise and empires fall, but the shadow of Attila the Hun, the Scourge of God, will never be forgotten. If you think the wrath of God rode on horseback, leave a like, subscribe, and hit the bell to witness more legends of history's most fearsome warriors.